introduce you first to the team that we've got on the webinar with you today. It's myself, Mike McDougall, the Director of Learning for the IFOA, joined by Sunil Shah, who's one of our staff actuaries. See Kirsty Smith, head of our registry session. She'll be coordinating the Q&A session together with Eddie James, who will be answering many of the questions online. So if you have questions through it, please type them in there. We'll either cover them verbally at the end, or Ellie will be typing responses as we go through the session. So if we move on to the next slide. Just so what we are talking about today is first just a bit of an introduction overview as to why we've ended up as we are with the in-person exams that you're sitting, which I know for many of you is the first time in many of years you've sat an in-person closed book exam, and talk a bit about the things need to just help you be more ready for the exam day, to prepare ahead of the exam day. So now we'll take you through what to expect on the exam day and when you get to the exam venue. And then after that, I'll just close up on things to do after the exam day before we move into a Q&A session. So moving on, firstly, I just want to apologize to all of you for all the uncertainty we've had around these exam sessions. As Sunil and I both know that preparing for the exams is in itself a huge amount of work, very stressful in its own right, and I'm sorry about the overlay of stress around the exam delivery that we put on here. To say throughout this process, our focus is on trying to make sure that every one of you, no matter where you are in the world, has a fair opportunity to sit the exams, that you can sit them in a secure environment, and the integrity of the exam session is retained, which is very important for enhancing the value of your pass and the value of your qualification as you go forward from there. As you know, we had initially intended to have all our exams being remotely invigilated online. Unfortunately, we were not comfortable that our remote invigilation partner for this session would be able to handle the number of students we had at any time. So we just looked to move everyone, or as many people as possible, into exam centers, whether that is in the UK or in other countries around the world. I know some of you will be unhappy with your allocation of venues, and I apologize for that, but regret there's nothing that we can do about that at this time. Obviously, being fairly late and coming forward looking for venues, it was hard to find venues of the size that we wanted in each of the different places where we know we've got large numbers of students. So I know that if there are many of you from the Birmingham area on the call here with us today, you may be disappointed that you've been allocated to London and or Manchester for some of your papers. It's simply because in Birmingham, relative to the number of candidates we've got in that broad area, there was only a very small venues that we could get access to, while we could get access to significantly larger space in London and also space in Manchester. Our team did a thorough job of just trying to make it that people had to travel as little as possible. Though I know for some people that is not comforting, because you're the one who's got to do the great distance, while some of your colleagues might be fortunate to be in a neighboring center. But unfortunately, we cannot allocate more people to a center than there are seats there. So that's the background to where we are today, and just to now go through to talk about what to expect as you build up to the exam day and through the exam day itself. So if we just look ahead before the exam day, move on to the next slide, and you know a lot of this has been familiar for anyone who's written exams with us for the last 5 years, but just to go through it now briefly, and then be obviously for people writing for the first time, there are things you can follow up and deal with as the slide puts through to us. The exam system you're writing on that you've used for the last few years is exactly the same as it has been. The difference is you'll be sitting in a center, the books will be closed, and you'll be invigilated. But should be receiving emails about the exams. Your joining instructions will be coming available, or if they've not come available in the last 2 days, they will be available by the end of today. Just to review those, So you'll be getting details just to double check on your center. Candidates sitting the CS1B or the CS2B exams will still have access to the data sets ahead of the exams as you have had over the last few years, but these will be downloaded onto your computer at the exam center, so Sonal will stress in more detail when she gets onto there. Candidates writing CP3 will still be able to access the key information 3 days ahead of the exam. I'll leave it to Sonal to talk in more detail about exactly how that will be working. Obviously, just ahead of the exam to make sure you know not just your username and password, but also to have your ARN number available. And you may take a piece of paper with those 3 details on them into the exam room. Exam room itself can be stressful, and it will obviously not be helpful if you've forgotten one of those going into the exam. So just put that down on a piece of paper and have that ready to go with you. So we go into just a few more details to think about ahead of the exam day on the next slide. The first thing, just to really stress, know exactly where your exam venue is. Look it up. I know on the website it gives you the 3 little words option, how it's available on that, but look it up through whatever apps or processes that you need to know exactly where you're going, exactly how you're going to get there. My recommendation, and certainly from the days when I was writing the exam, something that I always felt was important to do was to make a dry run through to the exam center at the rush hour traffic time that you'll be writing the exam, to know what you need to do so you can really make time your friend on the day of the exams. Because the last thing you want to do is to arrive there flustered and stressed and late for the exam. Arrive there with plenty of time to spare, just so that you can be more relaxed by the time the exam starts. Ahead of the exam, prepare the pack of material that you may take into the exam. And just very briefly, I'll just briefly mention things, and Sonal will take us into more detail on those. You need to have form of ID to get into the exam room. You may bring a calculator. There'll be none provided there. You may bring your orange book of formula and tables. Those might be there, and obviously pens and items like that. Some form of snack or water bottle, but there's very little that you can take directly with you to your seat. Don't go weighed down with many other things, because you'll need to leave those in this either a secure place or the back of the room. Every venue will be slightly different as to where you leave them, but Sonal will take you into more detail on that. But just prepare, pack lightly, and be ready to go. And just again, encourage you to make time your friend, know how you're going to get there. So on the morning of the exam, you're ready to go with one stress taken off your plate. And on that note, as we move into the exam day, I'll hand you over to Sonal.
Thank you, Mike. So we'll now look at the exam day itself. And we'll start with talking about your arrival, the identity documents you'll need, and talk a bit about your belongings and what you can and can't take with you to the centre. So firstly, your arrival. As Mike has already said, please think about your time management. We strongly recommend that you arrive at the centre at least an hour before the start time of your exam. Now, this isn't compulsory, but it is a strong recommendation to help you to get prepared and to help you to register and feel settled. Now, please note, though, there is a strong rule around the time after which you cannot enter the exam room. And that is if you arrive more than 30 minutes after the start time of your exam. So please ensure that you do leave yourself enough time to get to the venue and that you're able to prepare fully and sit your exam. Now, the other thing that Mike has already touched upon is the identity. So we will be requiring proof of your identity. So you must provide a valid proof of ID, otherwise you will not be permitted to sit the exams. Now, there are various forms of identification documents that you can present. So they include things like driver's license, passport, some temporary government issued IDs and other types of government issued IDs, and we appreciate some of these might be in a digital format. Also note that the name on your identification document must match the exam registration details, and you must resemble the photo that is present on your ID. So moving on to the next slide, please. So just continuing with the ID, notice that it has to be a valid within date identification document, so you cannot use an expired document. And also please note that you have to bring your original. You cannot use photocopied IDs in place of the original documents. So please make sure that you're aware of what you need to bring with you to allow you to sit the exam. In other slides, we will look at items you're permitted to bring and not permitted to bring into the exam room. And just note that there is a list of these. And also you can find further details on the website under the exam rules. In terms of your belongings, again, anything that is not permitted will need to be stored. So there will be designated areas in every venue where you will be able to store your belongings. And this includes things like outerwear, coats, jackets, etc. But we'll go into more detail in the subsequent slides on items you can and cannot bring with you into the exam room. So firstly, we'll look at those items that you are permitted to bring with you. So we've already touched upon your identification documents, so please ensure that you do have those with you. The other item you're allowed to bring is your own hard copy of the formula and tables book. Now, you might know this as the gold or the orange book or any predecessor books like the green or blue books. What you can do is have a few annotations within the formula and tables books, because we appreciate as part of your learning and revision, you might have made a few supplemental notes of just to clarify something in the notes, or rather in the tables and the formulae. However, you're not allowed to bring any additional pieces of paper that may be added to these formulae and tables books. So no post-it notes, no sticky notes, no additional scrap pieces of paper. And also note that if you do not have your own copy, or if in fact you do not wish to bring your copy to the exam centre, you will have a soft copy, a PDF version available within the examination platform, so that option is available to you. Now, in addition, Mike has already touched upon this, but just to reiterate, you can bring one sheet of paper that has your username, your password, and your ARN, so your actuarial reference number, because you will need the ARN when it comes to the file naming convention for you to be able to upload your script. So those 3 pieces of information can be on a piece of paper. You can also bring writing materials with you, so pencil, pen, you can also bring ruler and eraser. Also, you can bring a calculator of any make and model. So we don't have restrictions on the make and model of calculators, so please bring the one that you're comfortable using. And as Mike has already said, there won't be spare calculators at the centre, so please ensure that you do bring one of your own. Now, specifically for those of you sitting CP3, the Communications Practice exam, you are allowed to bring a printed copy of the advanced scenario material that is sent to you 3 days prior to the exam. And you can have annotations on that. So you're allowed to bring an annotated printed copy of the pre-exam materials, but you cannot bring any additional notes for this module. In terms of snacks and water, yes, you're allowed to bring some small snacks, maybe things like fruit or snack bars. And also, if you do bring water, please note that it must be in a clear plastic bottle, or in a clear bottle, so it doesn't have to be plastic, but a clear bottle rather, a transparent bottle. You may also bring some earplugs or ear defenders, but please note these have to be non-electronic. You might wish to have these with you, perhaps to block out some background noise. Now, in addition, some of you may be able to bring in some medication and specialist medical equipment if you have these pre-approved and agreed by the IFOA as part of the access and inclusion arrangements. So there may be some additional items applicable rather for some of you. Thanks. And next slide, please. Right, so conversely, there are certain items that you cannot have with you while you're sitting the exam. So firstly, no watches or clocks of any kind, so neither digital nor analog. You can't have any of those with you. There will be clocks in all the centres, so you will be able to see the time. Also, I think we've already touched upon this, you won't be able to bring any outerwear with you, so things like coats, jackets, or even hoodies, hats, scarves, caps, etc. Religious headwear is fine, you can obviously have that on you. Now, please think about how temperature works for you, and if you think you might get a bit cold in the exam room, think about bringing some light layers with you. So maybe a sweater or a cardigan that may help while you're in the exam room. In addition, right, other things you cannot bring. So any study text or revision cards, the core reading, other course notes, textbooks or past papers, you might have carried those with you while you're traveling to the exam center, but you cannot have those with you while you're sitting the exam. So these must be stored away. Also, you're not allowed to have any digital items, devices, so things like your phones, tablets, iPods, smartwatches, all of these need to be stored away. And please note, for such electronic devices, you must turn them off before you're putting them away so that no alarms or calls go off, because we don't want any disruption for any of the candidates. Also note that in terms of headphones or earpieces, these cannot be electronic or digital. And no other forms of digital or electronic devices can be brought, nor items that have recording or programmable capacities or any other technological or web-enabled equipment. So you cannot have those with you. Further, there are no other documents that you can keep with you whilst you're sitting the exam. So any notebooks, even if they're blank notebooks, any dictionaries or language dictionaries, etc., these will not be permitted. But you will have scrap paper, and I will come to this. And then, again, no other computer devices can be present at the desk other than those that are provided by the exam center. But the exception, again, is if you do have some pre-approved equipment as part of the access and inclusion arrangements, then those would be fine, but this will already be known to you. Thank you. So, pardon me. Right, now we look at the exam day setup. So we'll talk about your seat, the equipment available, and the logging in process. So please note, firstly, that all the equipment that you need will be ready and available for you. It'll be provided at the exam center. In terms of your seat, you will have an allocated seat, and the seat number will be given to you as part of your registration process. Now, all your exams will be completed and must be completed on the machines, so the laptops provided. Now, there may be some alternative arrangements for those who have access and inclusion arrangements, so there might be some exceptions to what we're covering in this slide. You will have access to the online exam system via the browser on the laptop, so that's what you're using. And some of you will be familiar with this already if you've set some of our previous exams. And just to note again, all the laptops will be ready, they will be set up for you to use. Now, you cannot have your own hardware, so things like mouse, laptop, or keyboard, unless you do have approved, requirements that have been approved. Otherwise, all these will be provided by the center. And please note also that all your exams will be taken on a single screen, but you can use the split screen functionality to enable you to have different applications open at the same time, should you wish to do so. But otherwise, it is one screen. Now, in terms of the exam platform, so for your logging in, again, you have your username and password, and you can bring that with you on a piece of paper, rather, as we've already mentioned. So you will use those to log into the platform. And then next slide, please. So thank you. So continuing, you will access the exam papers through the online exam system, and that's going to be using a browser on the exam center laptop. What you need to do is you need to download the exam paper to your machine, and you can use this as a reference during the exam. And again, just to say that for those of you who have sat the exams before, you will be familiar with this system. Now, please note, we have had questions on this, and please note that there will be no hard copies of the exam paper provided at the center. Everything will be on your computers. Any software rather that you need, such as our software, for example, for the CSB papers, any of the data sets, they will already be pre-installed on your machines ready to use. Now, specifically for R, it is worth mentioning, so all the required packages will be pre-installed, and the version that we're going to be using is R 4.2 or above, or RStudio 2024, so you'll have those already on the computers. Now, R is necessary anyway for the CS1 and CS2B papers, but also note you're permitted to use it for the CS1 and CS2A papers. However, please note that you must obviously show adequate working on your exam script. So even if you've used R to do some calculations or do some checks, please ensure that what you put in your script that examiners see is adequate, shows adequate working, as that's what's going to get marked. In terms of your exam answers, so you will have a specific and a specified format in which you produce your answers, or where you put your answers, be it Word, Excel, or whatever the case may be for the exam you're sitting. Please note, however, the autosave function is not going to be enabled. So please regularly save your work. Okay, make sure that you're doing that throughout the exam to prevent any loss of the progress that you've made. And also you need to make sure that you're saving your script on the desktop of the machine that you're using. So now we'll cover a little bit about during the exam, so just going through that duration of the exam and some features that you need to be aware of. So firstly, we'll talk about invigilation. Now, all exam centres are going to have invigilators in the room who will be walking around, who will be monitoring all the activity, and they'll help us ensure the integrity of exams is maintained. We have one invigilator per 10 candidates, so that's the ratio of invigilators, 1 to 10. What they're going to do, amongst, of course, part of the monitoring, but they will also be maintaining an attendance register. They will keep a record of the seating plan, and they will also note any incidents should anything happen during the exam that might impact your performance. So they will be making a note of the ongoings during the exam. Now, please note on this point that, of course, you have your obligations as well, that you are expected to adhere to assessment regulations, to fulfill the IFOA regulatory obligations, and of course the Actuaries Code and the ethical side of the code, particularly the integrity principle that very much applies to you when you're sitting the IFOA exams. Now, pardon me, so if we move on to completing your exam. Now, first, I just want to state the format. The exams now are closed book, and that means you cannot have any reference material, any notes, course notes, revision guides, whatever you may have used in your learning. You're not allowed to bring those in with you. You're not allowed to refer to those. So it is closed book in that effect. The only exception is if you're sitting CP3, so the Communications Practice Exam, you already get sent advanced scenario material 3 days prior to the exam, and you're allowed to bring a printout of this, and you can have annotations within this printout, but there's no other additional notes that you will be permitted to bring with you. Again, to reiterate now, in terms of completion of the exam, so yes, you're using the laptops that are provided. You must complete the exam in the format that is specified. It could be Word, it could be Excel. And there may be some candidates who have alternative arrangements in place due to the access and inclusion arrangements. So there may be some exceptions to this. Now, also note actually that you will have access to Excel. So there will be a blank Excel spreadsheet that you may use as a calculating tool. So Excel will be pre-installed. However, again, please ensure that in your script you are showing adequate working. Even if you've used Excel for checks or for calculation, just make sure that you do demonstrate to the examiners within your script what you've carried out for different calculations. Okay, now also during the exam, we appreciate you might need to speak to invigilators. So for example, if you need any bathroom breaks, what you must do is raise your hand, so get the attention of an invigilator, wait for them to come to you, and then notify them of your intention to have a bathroom, restroom, washroom break, and you will be escorted for this break. And there are no limits to how many such breaks you can take. The only thing to mention, though, is in the last 30 minutes of each exam, you are not allowed to leave the exam room. So please make sure that you plan your breaks accordingly. Now, also, you will already have access to scrap paper. There'll be 2 pieces of blank A4 paper available for you at your desk. But should you need any more, again, just get the attention of the invigilator, raise your hand and ask for what you need, and they'll be able to give additional pieces of paper to you. Now, when it comes to the end of the exam, once the invigilator lets you know that time is up, please stop the exam, stop typing, stop writing the exam. Okay, the time has ended. What you then have to do is upon completion of the exam, you need to obviously save. And as we've already said, please ensure you're saving throughout the exam anyway, but make sure you do a final save and then give it the appropriate file name. So you'll be using your ARN for this. And you must upload your submission onto the exam system on the laptop provided. So you'll have the file saved on the desktop, but please ensure you're uploading it. So follow the rules that are given to you. Please note also you cannot save or change the file name, or rather you must not, okay, you must not save or change the file name after the exam has ended, so during that 30-minute upload window. And again, just to reiterate, for those of you who've sat the exams, you will be familiar with the system. So the system, the online platform, that hasn't changed. Now note that once your exam has been submitted, you will receive an email receipt of successful submission. Now we appreciate, because you won't have your phones or laptops, tablets, etc. with you in the exam room, you won't be able to immediately check that your submission has taken place. However, at the first possible opportunity that you get once you're reunited with your possessions, please do check. And of course, if you haven't received an email within a reasonable amount of time, please get in touch with the relevant exam team. You'll have all those details available for you. And again, just want to iterate a point I've already made, that please note you cannot leave the exam room in the last 30 minutes of the exam. So any breaks you need, especially any bathroom, washroom, restroom breaks, please ensure you plan them in good time. So next slide, please. Thank you. So by your taking IFOA exams, you are adhering, or you have to adhere to the relevant rules and regulations. And in fact, when you start your exam, there is a box you tick to say that, yes, you've understood and you are going to be compliant with the relevant assessment regulations and examination rules. So I would strongly recommend that you read and familiarize yourselves with the relevant documents ahead of the exam day. So this is the IFOA examination handbook, the IFOA qualification handbook, the IFOA assessment regulations, and the IFOA examination rules. Right, now, end of the exam, once you've uploaded your script, and when it's the end, as it were, as you're leaving the exam room, what you need to be aware of. So firstly, just hand in all the scrap paper that you've used. You must hand this in to the invigilators. Secondly, please note that you must leave quietly. There may be other candidates who are still sitting their exams, and so please be mindful of other people around you and leave as quietly as you can. And thirdly, of course, please take all your belongings with you. So please collect those and take them. And now I'm going to hand back to Mike to talk to us about what happens after the exam day.
Thanks, Sonal. I think just quickly, just say a final thing for after you leave the exam, the invigilators will take copies of everything on your machine. So should you not get that email, please let us know and we'll make sure to get your solution from the invigilators, because the last thing that either you want or we want is for your solution not to be marked. But after the exam, the first thing is to look at any mitigating circumstances. This, as you know, has been a practice for a long time with us, but it is very important if there are issues that you feel have impacted your performance in the exam to make us aware of those. The deadline for those is the 20th of May. The invigilators will be providing information to us on any unusual circumstances happening in terms of the venue, be that excessive construction noise from next door or issues of that nature. But if you've experienced something, either be it in the exam room with being a particularly noisy corner of the room, or be it some other factor there, or when you're on the way to the exam, you were held up by a motor accident or a train strike or whatever else the factor might be that just increased your stress level on arrival on the exam above what would normally be expected while you're making that journey. To make us aware of that, if you score as close to the pass mark, the examiners almost certainly be taking into account, and it might just be enough to move you over the line if they accept your application. The second component is about queries about the exam. Just to stress, none of the invigilators in the room will be actuaries. They're all professional invigilators. That's what the organizations we've contracted do as a job for many large organizations, including ourselves. They do invigilation, but they're not going to be able to help you interpret a CS1 question or an SA4 question, or whatever the case might be. If you think a question is ambiguous or you can't quite understand it, answer it as best you can, and then raise a query with us after the exam. If you think something was either ambiguous or that it was out of the syllabus, or what any other factor with the question that you think was unreasonable, uncertain in any way, please raise that issue with us on the exams email line. The examiners and markers will review all of those, take it into account, and if something's ambiguous, they'll award points for students answering the question either of the two ways it can be interpreted, reasonably interpreted. So just bear those in mind, and then just to check through things, look through our various appeals policies that are all on the website. As far as conduct appeals, obviously it's a very different world to what we've had over the last 5 years. The type of conduct appeals will relate to should something be raised by an invigilator during the course of the exams that relates to you, and then there might be a further follow-up on that. It'll be a very different environment to what we have had before that. Where you've got any complaints that you'd like to raise the policy around that, please follow up with that and follow that should those be necessary. And I think once you've done all of these things, the most important thing after that is to relax. This has, like all exam sessions, but this one more so because of all the logistical challenges that you've had, been a very stressful time. The results will be coming out on the 1st and the 3rd of July, so there is anything up to 2 months from when you write the exams until the results are out and you need to start really getting down to the next session. But relax during that time. Just allow yourself to then be refreshed and ready for whatever challenges you have for the next session ahead. I think on that note, just to say again, I hope that you'll find the arrival in the exam center with knowing that it's a secure environment, that you'll be able to give it your best shot to really succeed in the exam. And I'm certainly be hoping for success for each of you in the exam. And I'll now hand over to Kirsty, who will lead us through the Q&A session. So over to you, Kirsty.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, everybody. I've been tracking through the questions as they've been coming in, and I've tried to pick out some themes where we can answer your questions as holistically as possible, not just sort of individually and specific. So there's been lots of questions around the experience. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of an overview. I know that we've covered some of this information on the slides, but as we've had so many questions, I think I'll just cover some of those things and elaborate a little bit. So the start time of the exams is 9 o'clock BST, and that will be across the globe. And we're asking candidates to arrive an hour earlier. That's our recommended. It's not essential, but it is highly recommended. The reason for that is not purely to make your life difficult. I appreciate that people have other commitments and that can be challenging in the morning. I would say plan out your journey, take into consideration traffic and whether you need to have early morning or overnight stays, depending on where you are, but have a good think about that. There needs to be time for ID checks. The invigilators will be checking your ID before they let you come into the room. We have had some questions around whether middle names will be checked. The information they will have will be the names that you have registered on the IFOA database. So we're not looking for middle names. So, you know, hopefully that will allay any concerns around that. As long as your forename and your surname is correct. If you have some change of name in a short period of time and you haven't been able to update that, you will need evidence. For example, if you have got married, you will need to bring your marriage certificate to corroborate that, and the invigilators will be able to take that on board. It will be recorded as part of incident reporting. Those incident reports will come back to the IFOA, and my team will be reviewing all of those, and we will get in touch with anybody that we need to. Calculators are permitted. Anybody who sat an exam pre-2020 will remember we used to have a specific list. We are not bringing that back in. Any calculators are permitted. What I will say is that unfortunately we are not able to provide backup copies. So if you want to bring two, if that makes you feel more confident in your planning, then please do so. What can you bring in? There's been a few questions around drinks. We are not being as rigid as perhaps some are. It doesn't need to be a clear bottle or clear liquid. It just needs to be a screw top bottle to protect the equipment, and no hot drinks are permitted because they can easily be spilled. With regards to snacks, we're not dietitians. We're not going to tell you what you can and can't have, but please be mindful of your other peers in the room. Nothing too smelly and nothing too crinkly. I'm sure you wouldn't appreciate it if it was next to you. Belongings. So when you arrive at the venue, you've gone through your checks, you will be shown, this will be specific to different venues. So it may be that your belongings will be at the back of the room. It may be that they're in a secure location. What I would say is please don't bring any valuables, because we don't want anything to go missing. So to go back on the point around watches and timings, if you've got an expensive watch, please don't bring it because you won't be able to wear it during your exam. There will be clocks in the room and they will be visible to all candidates. We had a question around whether you can set timers. Unfortunately, that is not possible because that is disruptive. So unfortunately, that's a no. Now, you will be, once you've positioned yourself with your belongings, you will be assigned a desk because there is a seating plan, and you will get the option to get familiar with your equipment setup. So hopefully that will make people feel a little bit more comfortable before they start the exam. So emphasis the encouragement to get there early because it gives you the opportunity to get familiar. As Sonal said earlier, if you are late, you must be seated at your desk by within 30 minutes of the start of the exam. That rule, just to reinforce, because we did have a couple of questions around that. I think that covers the kind of experience, what to expect. So hopefully that's helpful. I will just go over the equipment setup. Again, we have covered this, but there were a lot of questions around this. So just to reiterate, you will have a laptop on the desk. The laptop will be closed and will be the brain in the scenario. You will have an external keyboard, an external mouse, and an external monitor. The monitor will be a minimum of 17 inches, so a little bit bigger than a laptop screen. And there were some questions around, if you've got the two pieces of kit in the room, why can you not use two screens? So I just want to give you a little bit of reason behind that. It really isn't to make your life difficult. We appreciate that using two screens is normal for most people now. Unfortunately, the remote invigilation software does not work on a multiple screen. It does not do, it cannot function with multiple screens. So in order to be consistent and fair, as we have a number of individuals who have access arrangements, who will be sitting the exam remotely. There are also a small amount of candidates around the world that are based in areas where we couldn't assign them to a centre. So in the interest of consistency, I hope that makes sense. There will also be earplugs available. You can bring in your own earplugs, as Sonal said, but just to reiterate again, they must not be electronic. We will not be, they can be ear defenders, they can be the big old things, just as long as they're not electronic, that's fine. Okay, I think, oh, there was something else as well around if I need to bring in a medical receptacle. I think an inhaler was actually used. What I would say is have a look at the website. We'll follow up with the links, and you've been getting the links to the information in all the communications that you've been receiving from us leading up to and relevant to April 25. But there is a comfort aids list on the website that will give you the permitted things that you can bring in with you, and also the things that you need approval for. So I would have a look and make yourself familiar with those if you do think you have something that might be questioned. Mike, we had a few questions around the moving to closed book exams with respect specifically to why now, why the rush? Because we've been running online exams for the last number of years, and it feels like we may have rushed. So I will hand over to you to give us a little bit of background and insight into the why.
Thanks, Kirstine. I think that is a very good and a very fair question. Of course, as those who've been with us for a few years will know that the change to open books was made in response to COVID. The IFAA systems at the time couldn't continue with our long-established closed book tradition for exams. So to allow people to continue with their profession, with their qualification as a temporary move, a move to open books was permitted through that. And we stayed with that for, as Kirsty has said, for 5 years. And so throughout that time, we found with each exam session, we'd go through a cycle. During the time students were sitting the exams, we'd be getting all sorts of allegations that every second student in the country and around the world is busy cheating. And then once we're through that process and going through the process of reviewing the scripts and the various exam integrity checks, there'd be, that candidates would then be asked to provide evidence in certain areas with regard to conduct through the exam, and in times to be receive sanctions and disqualifications for violating the exam's plagiarism and collaboration rules. While many candidates, and I hope the majority of the candidates who were caught on that way were not intentionally driving out to try and violate the rules. Some of them were, but there are others who unintentionally violated the rules, despite us having an extremely stringent and high bar for where we drew the line for people violating the rules. So there's a lot of dissatisfaction both ends. Once people thought everyone's cheating, and then afterwards, if anyone was pulled out for having violated the rules, and just stress that the term violated the rules, because we're not making a value judgment about whether you intended to cheat, but you broke the rules and there needed to be a consequence for that, was that people were being unfairly penalized. And both of those things severely impacted the reputation and standing of our exams and our qualification. So that's why it was important to look back and say, how do we reestablish this? And to say the decision made at short notice and apparently rushed, I think that's a fair question. It was made that was not often. If we change the syllabus, for example, there's a 12-month period that is given to say that as from two sessions later, we will be changing the syllabus. for this, it was felt very important that the change needed to be made immediately for two reasons on that one. One was there was an increasing trend coming through of probable use of AI through exams, which was again being picked up by examiners and leading to a lot more checks, and again impacting the credibility of our exams, because whether it's a small number of people or a large number, that appeared to be happening in an increasing degree. And the second one, if we were to be giving notice as from 2 sessions from now, or as from September next year, we will be closing the books, there was a concern that it would be a cheater's paradise for the next session, that all sorts of tricks will be tried to break the rules and beat the closed books. So that's why it was felt from a risk management perspective, it was important to make the change for the next session. I absolutely take we could have communicated that more effectively than we did. We wanted to get the message to students as soon as possible after the September session came through, but we could have communicated more effectively with employers either at the same time or ahead of that to just make it a bit smoother through the transition. And maybe just talk a bit more about the closed book, because obviously that is something that is causing a certain amount of concern. For all the examiners, we went back to them and said, please review your papers, make sure they're appropriate for a closed book setting. And the examiners have gone back, they've looked at the exams. The exams are not and never have been meant to be a memory test. There might be 1 or 2 easy marks to lead you into a question, to just start it off with a few things, but it's not going to be one that's going to expect you to recite a whole Act of Parliament or a guidance note from end to end or anything like that. It is to understand where you are going to understand what the contents of the guidance note will be there, but to put a verbatim thing of it down is not the kind of thing that we'll be looking at through that. And the other one there's a lot of views around in terms of how students transition from closed to open book. And I know that makes many people feel that in the closed book environment, students can often manage their time a lot better than they do in an open book environment. In an open book environment, you'll hit a question where you put down a few points and you said, there's more, so to go and get another 2 or 3 points, you might spend 10 or 15 minutes going through the notes and getting down those few extra points. Well, had that, and then you might get yourself 3 marks for that, but you've lost 10 or 15 marks that might have given you 5, 10 or 15 marks later in the paper. So I think don't be startled, but with it, obviously know the material, go in there, relax, put down what you know, and just manage the time going forward. I apologize for the manner in which it was communicated, which could have been done more smoothly, but unfortunately, the circumstances meant we couldn't be giving a long lead time to say that in the session after next we'll be doing that, because that could potentially have led to such a high-risk session that we might have had to question whether we could let the results stand for the session. We certainly didn't want that to happen to what I like to believe are the vast majority of our students being honourable and honest through the process. So I think, Kirsty, that's enough on that one. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Mike. There has been some questions around packages and what to expect on your machine when you arrive at the venue. I want to reassure you that you don't have to worry about battery life on equipment or power. That will all be taken care of by the invigilators. We are using a professional organisation to provide the exam space, the assessment space, the invigilators and the equipment. And they work with many other professional bodies to do exactly that. So they will be prepared for every eventuality. They will have spare equipment in the room should any, hopefully not, issues occur. So that will be taken care of. On the equipment that you're using. You will have Microsoft Word, you will have Excel, you will have Adobe Reader. There were concerns that whether you could use the highlighting tool for the exam paper. The exam paper is a soft copy that, for anybody who is familiar with recently sitting IFOA exams, you will be pleased to know that the IFOA exam platform is the same. So it will be a similar experience for you. You'll be downloading the exam paper, and then anything that you want to copy and paste into your Word document, that you can then use the functionality within Word to highlight and whatever you see fit during the exam. There will also be RStudio, and there were some questions around the data sets and what to expect. So all the data sets relating to the CS exams will be pre-uploaded for you. So if you're sitting that exam, when you open RStudio, the data sets will be there ready for you. There is no concern around possible deleting, which is questions that we've had in the past. And as I say, the invigilators are on hand to support should anything be awry. There was also some questions around the help function and whether that will be accessible during the exam. The answer is yes, you are allowed to use the R help function. And that will open in a separate window, which you're already used to. Now, we've had some other questions, which I will throw out to Sonal and Mike. I'm not sure which one of you will want to pick this up. But there are some questions around the exam papers that are published on our website and which are the most relevant for preparing for the exams. I'm not sure who wants to pick that up.
Someone you want to take that one?
Sure. Okay, so two ways to look at this. So in terms of the syllabus, I would say looking at the more recent exam papers would be more reflective possibly of the syllabus, because very old papers, for example, might mean that there's been quite a bit of an evolution of the syllabus objectives for certain modules, and therefore the relevance from the content might not be the same for older papers relative to the newer papers. Having said that, because we were in closed book environment pre-2020, it might also be useful anyway to look at some of those papers, because they would have been under that closed book format, and therefore have a different balance, but slightly different balance in the way in which a knowledge type questions are asked. So I think the breadth of papers is often useful anyway, but just to bear in mind the relevance versus the formats as well. And Mike, I don't know if you wish to add anything to that.
And I think maybe just the 2019 papers will come to mind, as that was the current syllabus. So we know that some subjects have had minor modifications over the years, but since then, but that was the same syllabus, but with closed book exams. And you probably find the 2020 questions, because changes all came on so suddenly, there probably wasn't the same amount of time to review the papers, so they might be more inclined to a closed book style of question, even though because of the situation at the time they were open book delivery.
Thank you. There were some questions around why there's not a printed version of the exam paper. So I just want to say that we've been working very hard within a short period of time with the suppliers to see what is and what wasn't possible. And unfortunately, we could not organise printers at all of the centres, so it wouldn't have been a consistent experience. And also there wasn't time allowed in order to ship papers or arrange for papers to be in a hard copy. Additionally to that, those that are sitting remote invigilation also will be downloading a copy of the exam paper And there is work going on at the moment with the exam platform provider to see if we can lock down the possibility of not being able to print the exam paper. I can't promise that that will happen, but I will tell you that we're working on it to try and ensure that consistency. That leads us on to another question that was around ensuring fairness. So the in-person experience versus the remote sitters experience, how have we ensured fairness? I'll throw that one out to the team.
I think, let me take that one. I think it's one, you say it is a different setting, and we've done everything that we can to make sure in aggregate it's a fair and as close to a consistent experience as it can be. It's not identical for various reasons, but there are components that are different between the two. But our intention has to keep it as fair as possible, and we'll certainly be monitoring performance of different groups, how they go against previous groups. But just to talk through a few of the differences. Obviously, you're traveling to a venue. That is something that adds a level of stress into your day, that you've got to travel, compared with someone who rolls out of bed and goes to the other end of the room to start their exam. So we appreciate that as one thing where if you're in a venue, you feel, that's what I've done for the last 5 years now. I've got to travel. That is balanced by the risk that if you are writing the exam in your own site, you're 100% at risk of the quality and of your connectivity throughout that exam. Should you lose connectivity for more than a very small portion of the time, your exam will be nullified. So that is a risk that you're taking. If you're in the venue, you need to be able to download your paper at the start of the exam. And even if there's a problem uploading it at the end of the exam, the invigilators will be scraping it off the machine and to make sure that is provided to us. So that's a risk that the virtual candidates are taking, that the venue candidates are not taking. If you look then at the third component with regard to equipment, it's a valid thing to say, well, the people writing it at home are writing with equipment that they know and love and use all the time, while those who are writing in venues have to get used to the keyboard and the mouse and the screen and everything else. That is true, and that is a relevant factor, but I think a balancing factor on that is if something goes wrong with the equipment in the venue, the invigilators are expected to have spare equipment available to be able to replace, whether it's your keyboard, your laptop, your mouse, or screen, to have spares available to replace. If your equipment goes south when you're at home, then effectively that's your exam gone. So they are balanced. We did want everyone to have an identical experience. I did see a question about why didn't we test volumes before it was done. I can say there was fairly extensive testing done of volumes through the period, but when we used the first mock exam to move it from dummy data to real live people, it managed to take a volume of slightly over 200 candidates, and then it fell down at that time. Changes made since then will made it far more robust, but we felt that the risk that it wouldn't be able to withhold the volumes that we've got with at times 2,000 to 3,000 people sitting simultaneously, we would rather incur the cost and unfortunately give you a level of inconvenience, but to make sure you can have that exam as opposed to go through the exam and the system falls down on you. So that is where it is. We have looked to get a consistent experience, but unfortunately not an identical one. And
Mike, I'm so sorry. I just want to put in one final thing very quickly. I'm very conscious of time, and it's probably going to come back to you as well. The formalin tables, lots of questions around annotations, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. And I thought you might want to pick that up and round us off at the same time.
So maybe just in closing, before closing, just to excuse us going a minute or two over time, saying that we've taken a pragmatic view on the formulas and tables. We There are soft copies that will be available on the exam system. So if you're unsure about whether your copy meets the standards, then use that copy. Because we're introducing a new version of the formula and tables next year, which are now literally with the printers at this stage, we felt it'd be thoroughly unreasonable, and we wouldn't have had stocks to expect everyone to come with a new clean set of tables to the exams, but we know people have liked to use the hard copies. So if you've got minor annotations in your exams, whether that's highlighting a formula, just that derivation somewhere, a few lines, or highlighting particular factors, whatever the case might be, that's legitimate to have in the exams, those kind of annotations. But if you think it's an opportunity to put all your acronyms down for the various subjects and to hide all kinds of various codes in there, it's a reminder that you are subject to the actuaries' codes. If the invigilators think someone is using it in a peculiar way and referring to it in a strange way, they will make a note of that for us to look into. So my advice will be to use your discretion, remove all scraps of paper from it, whether they're Post-its, notes, or stickies, or anything else. Remove those, use your discretion, but if in doubt, rely on the soft copy that will be downloadable there on the system with the exam. So I think on that note, I'd like to thank you, Kirsty, for looking after the Q&A sessions. So Noel, for leading through the presentation, Ellie for, as always, answering a huge number of questions online. So please go and look and see if your questions specifically answered there. But above all of you for participating in the webinar, for your patience and forbearance over what I know has been a highly stressful time. And just hope now as we move into the last few weeks before the exams, can really get focused on being fully prepared, and wish you literally every success in the exams. I'm really looking forward to a successful session. So thank you all very much. Thank you.